Really excited to be here. We're really, coming in and we're talking about coaching, which I'm really excited for. Kind of plays on what our last webinar was all about mentoring. And so we're kind of going to that next stage of coaching. And our next webinar is going to be all about leadership. So we're kind of doing this nice 3-part series on how to build yourself up as a leader in your organization. We're going to start with, some introductions. You all kind of know me. My name is Noah Warder. I'm the head of people here at Guusto. If this is your first time joining us, I'm all things people. I really love what I do, and I really love building people teams and companies and all that kind of great stuff. And Guusto is an employee recognition and rewards platform. If you're looking for something to reward your employees or recognize them, come check us out. It's free to start. But I'm really excited to have Anita joining us today. She is the CEO and co-founder of The Grand, and I'm actually going to pass things over to her to do a self-introduction because she can talk about her expertise and why she started The Grand in the first place. So, Anita, over to you.
Thank you, Noah. Excited to be here as well. And, a little bit about my background. So previously, I was working as the head of knowledge at First Round Capital. And I noticed that, a lot of the work I did was designing learning experiences for founders to share knowledge with each other. And what I noticed is these founders would come in and say things like, I'm crushing it. Things are awesome. Everything's going great. And I was like, one, that's probably not true. And two, it's not very helpful. And so I really pushed people to share more openly and more vulnerably about what was really going on. And that's when the shift happened, where people would talk about, their self-worth, self-doubt. Am I good enough as a founder? And they left these conversations feeling really transformed because one, they realized that they're no longer alone on their journeys. And two, felt like they had a support system of other people who are going through something similar. And so, I did that. And then I became an executive coach working with founders one-on-one. Again, saw how transformational that work was, but realized that only, top executives could afford that. And so really thought about what would it look like if I can build a platform where people across ages and roles and geographies could get that level of peer support when they need it most. And my co-founder and I, Ray, our thesis is you need it most when you're going through a big work or life challenge and you feel like you don't have anyone to talk to, like being a founder or a new manager or a parent, returning to work, which we talked about. And so, The Grand exists to really help people feel less alone on their journeys and become the grandest version of themselves through a supportive community and an executive coach. And so that's, why we exist. And, I think the work that I've done previously, I saw just how important it is to support your people. To your point, it's really the thing that separated companies that were going to make it and that weren't. And so that's why coaching and this conversation is near and dear to my heart. And I'm excited to dive in.
Awesome. I love it. And it's just one of the reasons we're so excited to chat with you is that democratization of coaching, as you said, it's traditionally, it's always just been the C-suite, maybe the VPs and directors that get those coaches, but everyone can really benefit from coaching and the impact it can have on our careers. And I always like to talk about how leadership doesn't mean you're an executive. Everyone can be a leader in their organization. Yeah. And I think kind of coaching can really help people be the leaders they can be despite what level of the organization they're in. So let's just sort of start with level setting. I like level setting and making sure that we're all kind of on the same page when we start talking about this kind of stuff. So Anita, what is coaching to you? What does that mean? What does it look like? Let's kind of just dive in right there. Tell me what you think.
Yeah. So, to think about coaching, it's helpful to look at the etymology of the word. So coach, it comes from stagecoach, and it's really a means of conveyance, taking you from point A to B. And so the way that we define coaching at the Grand is really getting someone from where they are to where they want to be by tapping into their own wisdom and helping them stay accountable to their goals. And so that's really how we define it. And, I don't know if you watch Ted Lasso or if you're a fan, but, I always ask people, what did Ted Lasso help people do? Believe, right? Yeah. and to feel, more confident, believe in their abilities, empower them to find their own answers. And that's, ultimately what a good coach does. They see what, their players or their team can be rather than what they are. And so the same is true when you're working with your peers, your partners, your friends. It's really like, how do you help them be and help them realize that potential? And that's why, yeah, it's really important to add coaching to your toolbox. Like you said, you don't necessarily have to have that title. Anyone can take a coaching stance in the right situations. And as managers, it's particularly important because it's just adding another tool to your toolkit, and ultimately can really support and empower your team.
I love that. And I really want to kind of double down on that thing is like, it's helping people get to that next stage of what they are, believing that they can do that. And we all suffer from self-doubt and imposter syndrome and all these things. And having somebody that you can talk that through with a little bit, a trusted advisor, is really, really awesome. And so I would love to hear just like, what does good, like we touched on it a little bit, but like, can you give me an example of like what good coaching looks like? We talked about like why it's important for managers. What would a manager as a good coach kind of look like? How would that, scenario unfold in an organization?
Yeah, we'll dive into exactly what that looks like in a little bit when we share some of the tactics. But at a high level, I would say what it really does is, it helps you realize your team's blind spots, helps your direct reports grow into more capable leaders, and then enables your team's best work. What that looks like is taking more of a stance where you're listening and asking open and honest questions, which I'll dive into in a bit. But where I'd love to start is kind of, like what's the opposite of that, and what is the default approach? Because I think, like, imagine, Noah, you have a one-on-one today, and your direct reports launches into a challenge that they're experiencing. Like, who's had that experience before?
We've all had that experience. Raise your hand.
Right? Like, raise your hand, right in the comments. It's such a normal experience to have, right? And a lot of times this person who's coming to you really is stuck on the problem, and they're just spinning and spinning on the problem. And you think about, okay, like what can I do? And as their manager, you want to fix it. And it's not a bad thing. It's just something that's innate in our nature, and there are a lot of reasons that we want to do that. And so, think about, okay, I'll ask you, like, what might be a reason that you want to fix someone's problem, or what's the like the reason you go into fixing or advice giving mode?
I think there's a couple of reasons. One, I think managers are strapped for time, and it's very quick to just fix something, right? It's just like I'll just do it myself because it's faster, and then we'll move on. I think the other thing is that like as humans, we want to relieve people of the frustration and pain that they're seeing, and the quickest solution to do that is to just fix the problem for them. I think I do this with my kids a lot of the time. It's like they're struggling with something, and I really have to hold myself back to just be like, I'll just do it.
Yeah.
Like teaching my son how to tie his shoes. He's like, oh, is this really hard? And I'm like, this is a life skill you need to learn. Let's walk through it, and let's keep trying and really motivating them to do it, instead of just being like, I'll just do it because we got to get out the door and get to basketball practice.
Precisely. So you hit on, two of the four reasons that I wanted to talk about. Like, one, I want to check this off my to-do list. As a manager, I'm so strapped for time. You're moving so fast in your organization. How do I just keep things moving? And so I feel like, okay, I'm going to fix it, and things are going to, be great. The second one that you identified was wanting to be helpful and relieving someone's pain. Like, for sure, who doesn't want to be helpful and then also feel valuable in that way? And so I think those are very common reasons. The other two are, I know the answer. I'm the expert. So let me impart that wisdom to you. And then the last one is, if I can't fix it, they'll know I'm faking it. They'll find me out, right? It's like potentially this imposter syndrome. So you feel like you need to have the answers, even if you don't know the right answer. And so, I'll share from my experience, I resonate with all of them, and I'll ask the audience, feel free to put in the comments if any of those reasons resonate with you or if you've done that, before. Yeah, saying the imposter syndrome is real. Yeah, you're in this position. You feel like you need to know the answers. For me, the one around, wanting to be helpful, this was very true, especially, in my career where I was managing several people who just graduated from college. And I wanted to be a very empathetic leader, and I put myself in their shoes. And I reflected on my first job post college. I had a manager who was so unclear, not supportive. I did not set me up for success. And I really, vowed to do the opposite. And I'm sure so many of us have had those experiences, right? Like who's
Who's
had
had a bad manager?
had a
I
bad
think we had a webinar about this earlier in the year.
Yeah, exactly. And the stats, right? 57% of people have left a job because of a bad manager. And I think another, 30+% has thought about leaving. So, I wanted to do whatever I could to be super helpful. And in my mind, I thought I needed to fix my direct report's problems. And so one day my direct report comes into a one-on-one and she's feeling really overwhelmed about everything that's on her plate. And she really couldn't figure out how to prioritize. So I immediately jumped into fix it mode. I asked her to take out a sheet of paper, draw a big triangle on it, and break it up into thirds. And in the bottom, I wrote down, 5 things she should work on for the week. In the middle, I wrote down 3 things she should finish over the next 3 days. And at the top, I wrote down 1 thing she should finish by the end of the day. And so I thought that here I am, I'm helping her. And so I did this for her for several weeks. And I thought I solved her problem, but instead, what happened is her creativity waned. She would spend long hours just trying to get the to-do list done. And she wasn't that same vibrant person that I hired. And around that same time, I ended up taking my first coaching certification courses. And I had this aha moment that I wasn't actually helping her by fixing her problem. I was actually hurting her. And at that point, I decided to shift my default from fixing to coaching. And so instead of feeling like I'm this hero that's here to save the day, I asked myself, okay, how can I actually enable my direct reports to be their best selves? So, and do their best work ultimately. So yeah, that's just, one example of a story. We've all been there before.
I really love that. And I think the way I also think of it is just, we all want to be nice. We want to be nice to people. And the nice thing to do is to fix the problem, but it's not necessarily the kind thing to do, because the kind thing to do would be to help them grow. And as you said, enable them to solve this problem for themselves and learn how to do that. And just kind of like empower people to grow and be the best version of themselves. Because if we just keep stepping in and fixing things, we're not really solving the root problem. We're just treating the symptom.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And we aren't going to have the best answers always. It diminishes the potential for the rest of your team to bring, their best ideas to the forefront. And, sometimes we don't have enough context to guide people in the exact right way. And so we want to be able to unearth that from our team and from our, companies at large.
I love that. I love it. And it's like, why do we hire really smart people if we're not going to listen to them and help them fix the problems that we hired them to fix, instead of us trying to always fix every problem?
Exactly. It's a thing we have to unlearn. And it's a work in progress for sure. Yeah.
It can be one of those things where like ego is the ultimate enemy in that regard, of just like, we always want to be the person that people come to fix problems, but and also we're not even being able to get our own work done because we're just constantly putting out fires.
Exactly.
So I think we've touched on this a little bit of like why this is so critical for an organization to like grow and expand, but like what other areas does like a coaching culture, let's call it that, a coaching culture in an organization impact? Like, how have you seen this create like a real cultural change in an organization? I'd love to hear, kind of the steps that you took to help, and, what happened and how did that change an organization's sort of ability to perform and grow?
Yeah, I think the thing that comes to mind is one, there is just a different language and communication around an organization once everyone has these skills. And so to the point that we are saying earlier, when you're in constant, fire drill, fix it mode, some of the best, most creative ideas aren't coming to the top. And everyone is very reactive versus proactive. And so by taking a coaching stance, I think that's the shift that I've seen with some of the organizations that we've worked with, where there's enough space for the best, most innovative ideas to really come through because people are taking more of this coaching stance, and it becomes almost this common language and leadership language that people have. And so it's not to say that coaching is always the right, tool to use. And I'm happy, later I'll talk about like when to use fixing versus coaching. But I think it just like adding it to your toolkit gives people a different approach to really address problems, and it leads to better communication, a deeper sense of belonging, which research shows leads to higher performance and business outcomes. And so it has all these impacts within an organization and really shapes the culture overall, which allows the employees and the overall company to grow. And so that's the biggest impact that I've seen.
I love it. I love it. And I'm a bit of a sucker for stats and whatnot, but like you see, especially sort of with younger employees as they're coming into the workforce, if they're not getting that coaching and that career growth, they'll leave an organization within 6 months to 12 months. Like they'll leave really quickly if they're not seeing that happening.
Mhm.
And then it also provides an avenue for the older generation, those who are more experienced in the organization, to kind of download all of those best practices, the things they've learned, not fixing wise, but really like helping people get to the next conversation and building those relationships between different generations. That is also so very important.
Mhm. Absolutely. And, the stat there around belonging. So if someone feels, if an organization increases belonging, that leads to 56% increase in performance, lower 6 days, lower turnover. And so the business impact is really there.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, let's talk about what coaching looks like. So there's I've done the research, I've looked at it. There's lots of different coaching frameworks out there. What are the ones that we were going to talk about? A couple here, and I think that's let's talk about what those look like, or a couple that our team or our audience can kind of go away with and maybe start using right away.
Yeah. So I want to give some foundational frameworks to start, and then we'll dive into more tactical ones. So the two that I want to focus on first is really empathetic listening. As leaders, this is an often neglected skill because we've been primed, again, like we talked about, to give advice. And the way that we listen is really focused on pattern matching and problem solving. And the way I define that is really self-focused listening. The stance that you're taking is, what does this mean for me? And you're listening to react and respond, and you're focused on pattern matching and problem solving. How many people in the comments, have done that before? Yes. Right? Like daily, you're constantly, oh, what do I say next? What do I do? Again, how do I solve this problem? And so it's really hard to make this shift unless you're conscious of it. And so empathetic listening is really taking the stance of what's going on for this person. And yeah, Bo, you notice yourself doing this. Yeah, it's really about listening to understand a person's experience and staying curious and open to new possibilities. And so it seems simple enough, but it's this little nuance that you'll notice. And if you're intentional about it, trying to shift from that self-focused listening to the empathetic listening is critical. And so that's one of the first foundational skills. The second one is really asking open and honest questions. And so Noah, if you were to define an open and honest question, what might that be?
When I think of that, I think of like you're asking a question because you are genuinely curious and you want the other person to have to think about it. You're not looking for that sort of like instant they already know the answer, that they're going to have to do a little bit of self-reflection as well. And so you're asking those probing questions to make the person, I'm going to say it, almost a little uncomfortable and having to reflect on what the answers they are going to give.
Yeah, absolutely. You're taking a curious stance, and the key is an open and honest question is one where you don't have a preferred answer. You don't know the answer to that question, and you're not trying to steer the person into a particular direction. So a lot of times nowadays, people actually share their opinions that are masked as questions. So I'll give you an example. Like, don't you think you should do it this way? That is not a question. That is just an opinion with a question mark at the end of it. And so just being really thoughtful about taking that stance and really asking an open and honest question. The other couple tips there is, it can't be a yes or no question. And we try to avoid why questions, because why actually puts people on the defense and makes them have to justify, why they're headed in a direction.
I like that. I haven't thought about the why question before. That's a good point. I know one resource that helped me a lot get better at this was a book called Time to Think. Are you familiar with it? It's all about, like, how do you build what they call a thinking environment, so space for people to pause and think and come to answers on their own, and really, like you said, we're always in prime to jump in and respond, and I need to get my 2 cents in so I look like the smart person in the room. What this book really talks about is, like, no, don't do that. It's really about, like, encouraging the silence in the room, which is very hard for people to sit in, but allows people to think and come to conclusions. And, you ask some of those open and honest and probing questions to help people kind of get to where they want to get to without, telling them the answer or fixing it for them.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up because, to your point earlier, there is some, uncomfortableness in this because we're not used to it. And oftentimes when you're at a fast growing company, you're just running from thing to thing. And so to pause and reflect and someone asking you questions in that manner, it is going to feel uncomfortable. But it's also such a gift because we don't, give ourselves the space to do that. And I'm excited to share, a couple more frameworks that you can use, immediately with your peers, with your direct reports, with your family, just so you can take more of that coaching stance. You ready?
I'm ready. Let's do this. So just to prime everyone, so Anita's going to take me through a little coaching session, and we put in the hot seat and talk about a little bit of a struggle that I'm dealing with currently. And so we're gonna get uncomfortable live here on the webinar.
Fantastic. No, thank you for being up for it. I'll start by sharing the framework, and then we can go into those set of questions with you. Perfect. So, the first tool I'm going to use, it's called Outcome Shift. And what it does is it really gets the person away from spinning on the problem and really defines what they want. And so as a result, you're able to clarify what they're solving for. As humans, we're not very good at clarifying what we want. And this line of reasoning and questioning helps you get to the core of it. Oftentimes we're so stuck on the problem, we haven't really tried to imagine what we want from a situation. And without knowing what you want, you can't actually move towards it. And so the outcome shift is a set of questions that really orients your thinking in a way to maximize the possibility of getting what you want. And so simple way to do it, which we'll model for you in a little bit, is start with a question. In this situation, what would you like? And then you listen really carefully and you repeat back in their own words what they answered. And then you ask, what will having that do for you? And it's super important to use that exact language. What will having that do for you? Because it presupposes that that person will get to where they want to go. And then you keep asking, what will having that do for you, until you get into the core of what it is that they want. And again, it's going to feel uncomfortable sometimes, but really just like building that muscle and getting into that habit gets to the core. I worked with someone in the past where, they wanted to get their MBA, and we went down this line of, conversation, and got to the point where, no, they actually wanted to make their parents proud. And so, what are other ways that they could do that? So anyway, I'm happy to dive into this with you, Noah. And so my question for you to start is, what is a professional challenge on your plate that if you can magically solve, you'd feel on a much more clear path? And if you can share a metaphor for that challenge, that would also be great. It could be something like, it's like we're speaking different languages, or it's like I'm on a battlefield. So whatever comes to mind, just take a moment and feel free to share when you're ready.
Awesome. I mean, I thought about this a little bit before we actually came into this conversation. So, look, I think the biggest thing for me professionally right now is really like that the clarity of purpose for the next year. Like, what is the purpose of my team and the strategy that we're trying to execute on over the next year, and how is that going to impact the business? I think is a huge question mark still for me, and still wanting to what are we going to do? I have lots of ideas, but I want to have a really clear purpose that I can execute on. And I'd say the metaphor there is like I'm wandering through a field of fog, and I've got a million directions I can go in, and they'll all probably get me to the place that I want to go, but I want to take the safest, clearest, fastest approach.
I love that. That metaphor is very clarifying. So Noah, in this situation, what would you like?
I would like, I think, like a really clear statement or objective, or even just end state of where we would like to be by the end of 2024. And I think that would help me wrap my head around of just like, how can I help impact that?
Okay, so you want a clear statement of where you want to be by the end of 2024, and what will having that do for you?
I think it will allow me to work with my team on figuring out, what projects, what goals, what impact we can have on the organization throughout the year.
Okay, so it'll help you work better with your teams and really think about the impact that you can make on the organization as a whole. What will having that do for you?
I think it'll give us clarity and more purpose and boost our engagement, because if we're able to understand where we're going to have impact and how we're going to grow, then we're going to be spinning our wheels less. There's going to be less ambiguity. There's going to be less just like, what's next? Are we just waiting for the next boot to drop before we get to do the next project? I think that's the biggest thing for me. It's like, what are we doing?
So it will help you have more clarity, more purpose, more impact, and less ambiguity across the organization. What will having that do for you?
I think it'll reduce my stress and allow me to really focus on key projects that I think are really impactful, and I can prove how that impacts the business. And it'll also allow me to kind of disassociate myself a little bit when I'm done for the day and with my family.
So it'll allow you to de-stress a little bit and remove yourself or disassociate yourself from the day-to-day and empower your team. What will having that do for you?
I think seeing my team be empowered will, I'll be able to see them more engaged and them have their careers advance, which is very important to me, and seeing them gain the skills and the experience that they want to be getting, or they'll help them in their future careers. And I think the de-stress, I will have a better quality of life. I'll be more engaged. I'll be happier, and I'll be able to, be present with my kids when I'm supposed to be present with them.
Beautiful. So I want to ask you, Noah, one more time, what would you like?
I'd like less stress in my life, so I can be more present for my family.
Yeah, beautiful. We can wrap this line of questioning or this conversation here, but that was just such a beautiful journey of where we started and where we ended up. And I want to dive into that in just a bit, but first and foremost, like, how did that feel being on the receiving end of that coaching?
It was great. Like I really appreciated it. It made me think a little bit deeper of each layer and like it's what do I actually want? What do I want to see at the end of the day? And what I want to see at the end of the day is having my stress levels decrease, and I want to be more present for my family. That's very important to me right now, especially as I've got young kids who time's going by fast, and I want to be present for it.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's, if you had just come to me and said, "Okay, I want more clarity for our plan for 2024," and if I come in and say, "Okay, great, like, let's map this out," then we're missing the core of what it is that you actually want. And two things that I heard, one is empowering your team so that they're really engaged and can, feel this deep sense of purpose with the work that they're doing, and then also reduce your stress levels and so that you can be more present for your family. Like, we wouldn't have gotten there had I not taken the time to really dive deep and ask you those questions. And for the coach, it does feel uncomfortable because you keep asking the same question and it's not natural. But on the receiving end, to your point, it felt great and clarifying, because when's the last time someone asked you these questions?
I'm gonna say probably never. maybe maybe a few times, but yeah, not often.
Yeah. And so I think, it's again such a simple yet powerful tool that we have that we should add to our toolkit. Because, like, just think of the expansiveness or where you're able to go when, again, I'm just taking a stance of, listening empathetically, repeating back what I hear, and just staying curious and asking these open and honest questions. The second one, we can do, in a brief way. So the second tool is, once you've gotten someone to clarify what they want, you can then introduce the options exploration. And so what that is it's just gets the other person brainstorming what actions they can take to pursue what they want. And so as a result, again, you're shifting them from spinning on the problem to thinking proactively about next steps. And so again, moving them from reactive to proactive. And so how to do it, very simple. It's another set of questions. The first one, what options do you have to make progress toward that outcome? What other options do you have? What do you want to try first? And so you're just sparking that conversation so that they can think concretely about, what are the steps I can take. And so going back to where we ended, Noah, what options do you have to make progress to that future state that you want?
I think for I think it's one option is just sitting down with the rest of the executive team and really hashing out what is that we want in 2024 and trying to lead that conversation or empower other people to have that conversation and ask questions and try and come to some sort of conclusion. The other one is I can define it for my own team for 2024 and see if it aligns with what others are expecting. And the third option is I can kind of almost go to the whole company and ask them what they think is going to happen in 2024, what they want to happen in 2024, maybe with a survey or, doing little focus groups and having those conversations. So I think those are three options that I can think of just off the top of my head.
Is there anything else that you would add to those options?
Well, I think, going to my team and asking them as well,
Mhm.
what are the things that they think are most important for 2024 and what we should be working on. And maybe also going to like my community, my network of HR peers, and kind of laying out the situation, being like, what have you seen happen next steps
Mhm.
wise? What are some things that we should be focusing on, and kind of crowdsourcing where we should be.
Got it. And of those options, which one do you want to try first?
Probably just sitting down with the rest of the senior leadership team and like as an organization, where do we want to be at the end of next year, and what is that goal? What does it look like, and how are we going to communicate that to the rest of the organization?
Perfect. And I'm going to ask you to put, a when and a where for that, because you're more likely to actually, stay accountable to that. So you could just say, when you're going to have this conversation. And then
I'll do it tomorrow at our weekly leadership meeting I believe it starts at 12:30 p.m. Pacific time.
Love it. So you heard it here first. We'll make sure everyone here keeps you accountable. But that's again another tool that you can use to take something where Noah's thinking about all the possibilities, but then actually how do you chunk it down to think about, okay, proactively, what are the next steps I can take? So I see some questions in the chat, and so one question: how can you create an environment that someone feels comfortable sharing as much? That is a great question, because this is a pretty vulnerable, conversation to have with folks. And I think one of the best things you can do is start building the psychological safety within your organization so that that level of comfort is there. Two tactical ways to do that. One is to share that part of yourself with your team. So you proactively share things that are maybe a bit vulnerable, the way that Noah modeled so beautifully here today. And the other thing that I would recommend is, what are the structures you have in place so that everyone gets that level of vulnerability as a practice within the organization. And so one example of that is a ritual that we have at the Grand, and both in our community but also at our company. We do red, yellow, green check-ins at all of our meetings, which is a simple stoplight analogy, just to check in with yourself and with each other. And so green means, I'm here, I'm fully present, ready to go. Yellow means I'm here, but maybe there's, an email lingering on my mind, so I'm a little distracted. Red means I'm physically here, but mentally I'm completely somewhere else. And there's no right or wrong. It's just a way for you to honestly check in with yourself and with each other. Because sometimes, if Noah's distracted in this meeting that we're having, I'm going to take it personally and think, oh, it's something to do with me. But if you create that safe space for people to talk openly about what's going on, then there's just a deeper level of understanding and vulnerability within the organization. So I would really think about, like, what else are you doing to create that psychological safety so that you can have some of these really open conversations.
I really like that. I mean, I'll share one thing that we do at Guusto is that when our executives, our co-founders, get feedback from the team during our performance management reviews, they share that at the next all hands. They say, this is the feedback I got, and this is how I'm going to be better. And so, again, to your point of like a bit of that vulnerability and accountability of just like, hey, these are the areas that I'm not working really well in, and this is how I'm going to get better at it. It shows kind of that we're all growing and we're all in this together. We're not all perfect people, especially at that leadership level.
Mm-hmm. I love that. That's a great example.
And I think, Bo, to your point, I struggle to tell a manager that my true priority is not work. I hear you. That's really hard, especially if you don't have that psychological safety with your manager. But I think sometimes when we can be honest about what our priorities are, it makes us better at our work, because then we can be fully focused when we're at work and being really, really great. And then when we're not at work, we're over there, we're recharging, we're doing the things that we love to do so that we can be present at work.
Yeah, exactly. And nowadays, I think people are understanding that it's one and the same, and really thinking about us as humans and our whole selves. You hopefully don't have to hide those parts of you, where you've built, strong enough culture where you can talk about, all the facets of your identity beyond just work, and that it's okay to have those parts of you, and it's okay to have other, priorities within, other dimensions of well-being, which we talk a lot about. Like, career is just one facet of it. There's emotional resilience, there's physical wellness, there's intellectual curiosity. There's so many other things that, make you who you are. And so I think, just creating that culture and that open dialogue across the company is super important.
I love it. I think it's super great. I saw a Disrupt HR talk about this, of like taking your mask off at work, and what does that actually mean, and what does that look like, and how that can be very difficult for some people and easier for others. But to create a truly inclusive culture that is full of belonging, people are going to have to start taking off their masks a bit more.
Yeah, like as much as they want to. It's an invitation. And I do think, I will say, the change in tide that I've seen is just given the pandemic. We've had this collective trauma that we've all experienced. And so there is a deeper level of understanding of everything that everyone's confronting, which I think didn't exist in the past as much. And so I'm optimistic that, this becomes the norm.
Yeah, I think there's a new generation of leaders who are coming out of the pandemic who are much more open to having those conversations and making space for that kind of stuff. There is still some of the old guard out there that is very much still everything's stoic and perfect, and we don't talk about feelings at work because this is work. But I think that is on the way out.
Yeah, exactly. And then, Carla brings up in the chat, those tiny actions that you do over time builds trust. And I think that is so key. Like, all of this is not going to change overnight. And, same with adding, coaching to your toolkit. It's not something that overnight you're going to completely change your management approach. It's like, what are those incremental steps or those, habits that you can bring in so that you can make these, tweaks to make your organization have a greater sense of belonging and understanding.
We've got another question that just popped in, and I'd love to get your perspective on it. About, Grow is a tried and tested coaching model. Do you think Grow is still an effective model in today's world?
That is a great question, Teresa. I do believe Grow is effective and, again, makes coaching accessible for anyone who hasn't taken a coaching stance before. I think a lot of times it's really just having that tool or framework that you can go to make you comfortable. And so I'm less concerned about, are you using Outcome Shift, are you using Grow, but more, are you giving yourself the chance to practice and, bring that into your one-on-ones. And so, I definitely think that there is some viability in that. If it works for you, definitely would recommend it. And again, it's really about, okay, what is the tool that you're actually going to implement and makes you feel more empowered to start taking more of a coaching stance. So,
just for the audience, what is the Grow coaching model? Can we dive into what does that actually look like? What does the acronym stand for?
Yeah,
I generally hate acronyms, but
It's similar. So it's similar to the Outcome Shift, but it's a slightly different approach where Grow, so it stands for goal, reality, obstacles, and the way forward. And so it's just a line of, questions within each of those categories, again, to get you from, where your goal is and what are the actual options that you have to move towards it. I think what I like about Outcome Shift a bit better is you're getting really into the core of, oh, look at that. The new, the new icons. I talk a lot with my hands. So, but yeah, what I like about Outcome Shift is what I mentioned before. People aren't really great at knowing what their goal is off the bat. And so it gives you the space to get to the core of, what someone actually wants. And then you do options exploration to, chunk out what are the steps it can take. I think with Grow, some of that you might rush into, the way forward too quickly before understanding what is the root cause of, someone's challenge.
Awesome. Thanks for diving a little bit deeper into that. And thanks, Teresa, for the question. If you have any other questions, kind of keep dropping them in here. But I'm going to ask one of just a lot of us in HR, we're juggling a lot. We're doing a lot of things. We're trying to learn how to be performance management experts and remote experts. And, when the pandemic hit, pandemic experts, comp experts, we're expected to do a lot. So what resources, where would you sort of tell people to go to kind of start building their knowledge on coaching and how to start getting better at it? Obviously, they can go to the Grant, they can talk to you, they can, really use you as a resource and the resources that you have at your website. And we'll be sharing some of those at the end of the webinar and in the follow-up email. But if people just wanted to start exploring the world of coaching, where could they go? Where could they go get certified? Where could they, just kind of find more information?
Yeah, that is a great question. And there are a lot of certification programs out there like ICF, NLP, and everything in between. I think the most important thing, though, like what I would personally do is talk to a coach, someone that you admire, someone that you really appreciate their style, because there's just such a wide range of coaching these days. And I think each certification program or each resource is really unique to what that person is looking for and the type of coaching that they want to do. And so really thinking about, who in your network is someone that, you appreciate their leadership style, you appreciate their coaching style, understand, what resources really helped them, get to where they are. Of course, in my unbiased opinion, our resources at the Grand are really helpful. And I would say the second thing is to just start practicing, because a lot of times, you can read all day and do all this research, but the best thing to do is actually have that live experience where you are, in a conversation with a direct report or a peer, and you're just trying out some of these tools to see, is it effective? Is it landing with the person? Is this a well-timed question or is it not? And just be really comfortable in that. For me personally, going back to this, if I don't have the answer, they'll know I'm faking it. And that imposter syndrome, when I first became a coach, I felt that and felt like, okay, someone's hiring me, to support them. I should tell them what to do. I need to prove my existence and, prove that it's worthwhile. And that was the wrong approach completely, because I made it about me and not about them. And so when I took a different stance and really, leaned on some of these resources and was really curious, that's when I did my best coaching, because it was in service of them and not me. And so that's what I would share with this group.
Awesome. I love it. And I think also being upfront with people that you're trying something new. Like, hey, I'm going to try this new framework and we're going to see if it works. If it doesn't work, we can try something else. But I think that's being a little bit of that vulnerability, as well as we're going to try this thing. It might not work. Let's see if it does. And if it doesn't, well, we'll try something different.
Exactly. Just naming it, so often that can just create a much more comfortable experience for both of you. So I absolutely agree with that.
Yeah. Bo, to your point, I don't know. Let's find out together. I do love that line of let's figure it out together. Because we don't need to have every answer. We don't need to have every way forward. But if we can work on it together and figure out the answer with others, it's almost more impactful, and it usually creates better relationships and more trust and that psychological safety that we were talking about earlier.
Exactly.
Cool. Well, Anita, I think that's kind of it. We don't have any other questions. Is there any last points you want to make before we kind of start wrapping things up?
Yeah. So, I know I mentioned earlier, I would share a little bit about, when to use fixing versus coaching. And so I do want to address that, because coaching is not going to work all the time. And I think it's really important to know, when to use fixing. And so there are a few situations that come up. One is if you're dealing with a really urgent and high stakes situation or problem. So if getting something right is critical and urgent, then the responsibility is a stretch for your team member, then coaching isn't appropriate. So you'll need to jump in, provide swift direction, but you can ask your team member to shadow you or, observe how you're handling it. And that's how they can learn and grow. The next is, if you need to give feedback. So coaching isn't a replacement for clear, actionable feedback, but it can actually amplify the effectiveness of your feedback. If you've noticed an opportunity for your team member to really grow, then you share that feedback directly. But then what I like to do is add an open and honest question to the end of that, so that it becomes more of a brainstorm or a collaboration. And so an example is, I've noticed in executive team meetings, you shy away from answering questions related to your domain. I'd love for you to own those questions going forward. What do you think that would take? How can I support you in that? And then, too often when we give feedback, we cannot drop it and then expect the person to go do the thing. But this opens up, that conversation. And then, a couple more. So if you're training someone who's less experienced and they really need more of the clear instructions, it's okay to give them that. And then once they become more experienced, then you add coaching. So, again, if they're presenting to an executive team meeting, you can give them the cheat sheet of, okay, this is what you might do to make sure that your message lands with this team, given you have that experience. And then, finally, if you're managing an underperformer, at that time, coaching isn't the right tool to use. You want to be more directive in that situation so that you can really help them, get to where they need to go, given they're not meeting expectations. And so those are just a few that I would highlight where fixing is actually the right approach. But coaching, we talked about all the other situations where coaching is the better approach.
Thank you. Thank you for adding that context and that clarification. I think, we don't, like you said, you don't want to be coaching all the time, every time. There are those moments where you just have to step in and kind of fix things. And as you are accountable for a lot of what happens as a leader or a manager.
Exactly.
Yeah. Awesome.
And I guess the last thing I'll say there is what I hope this conversation helps you do is just give you more range to handle different situations that come up within your organization. And so, most of the time as managers, we use fixing as our default. And so if you take anything away from today's conversation, it's how can you use coaching as the default and then actually bring in fixing as the exception when you need to.
I like that. And like you said, it's a tool that we can use. I think HR, we have a medley of tools at our disposal. It's which one to choose. And, you don't want to always default to the hammer every time.
Exactly.
All right. Well, I want to say thanks again, Anita. That was amazing. I learned a lot. I'm sure everyone in our audience learned a lot. Thank you for attending How to Stop Fixing and Start Coaching. If you're interested in learning more about Guusto, feel free to reach out at info@guusto.com. But if you're interested in learning a little bit more about the Grand, you can kind of get a complimentary workshop for your team. And so you can email Anita at thegrand.world with the subject line Guusto. So I'm just going to leave that there for a moment so everyone can kind of jot it down, take a screenshot, do what you got to do. Mm-hmm. You can also reach out to Anita on LinkedIn. I think we'll drop in those LinkedIn links in the comments in a moment for Anita and myself. And so we're always open to continuing the conversation in another medium or, just having a chat. I like chatting with people about this kind of stuff. This is why we do it. So, thanks again, everyone. Really appreciate you giving us your time. Thank you, Anita, for your expertise and, your perspective and walking me through that coaching session. It was very enlightening. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Of course. No, thank you so much for having me. And thanks for everyone tuning in. This is something that I'm really passionate about, can talk about at length. So if you liked what you heard today and you want me to come in and, deliver some workshops for your team, I'm more than happy to do that. So thank you so much for the opportunity to have this chat. And thanks for being in the hot seat. That was so fun.
I love it. I try to always be the first person to experiment with something. Like, let's see what happens. Why not? What's the worst that could happen?
Well, keep us posted.
Yeah, I will. Definitely.